Hello and welcome to Africa Live. I am Penina Karibe. Tonight, CGTN takes a moment to reflect on Africa's journey in 2025, from recollections on political transitions and economic milestones to unique success stories that shone through in different sectors. This year, Africa continued to play a key role at the UN, and South Africa even hosted the G20 summit. 2025 also saw challenges on the continent, such as armed conflicts in Sudan and the DRC, and climate-related disasters in some countries. There have been positive transitions politically as military rule gave way to democracy after elections in Gabon and Guinea, which is just awaiting final poll results. We will be looking at all this and much more, including advances African countries made in science and technology. Welcome to the show. This is Africa in 2025. Major developments occurred on the political scene, with the military intervening in some countries, while elections in others led to serious political tensions. Armed conflict persisted in Sudan, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and parts of West Africa, and international efforts to secure a ceasefire and lasting peace are expected to continue in 2026. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres renewed calls for an immediate ceasefire in Sudan, urging the warring factions to protect civilians. The war in Sudan began in April 2023 after a power struggle erupted between Sudan's army and the Rapid Support Forces. It has resulted in the two sides effectively running different parts of the huge country, with the army controlling eastern and central Sudan, including the capital Khartoum, and the RSF controlling most of the west, including nearly all of the Darfur region. For a closer look at just what figures we're talking about on the Sudan conflict, we hand over to Joy Kiruki-Juma, who is in our other studio. Some very revealing statistics you have there, Joy. What more can you tell us?
Thank you, Penina. Indeed, the conflict in Sudan has lasted for more than 2 years. And well, the figures tell a stark story. But let's first look at the numbers. Nearly 12 million people have been displaced by the conflict across Sudan, making it the worst displacement crisis in the world. This includes more than 4 million who have been forced to flee the country. The United Nations estimates that at least 40,000 people have been killed, with aid groups warning the true number could be many times higher. Many of these deaths occurred in Darfur, Kordofan, and Khartoum, where some of the fiercest fighting has taken place. So as the war continues between the Sudanese army and the Rapid Support Forces, what's the situation on the ground? This year, the army recaptured Khartoum, the capital, and much of central Sudan. With the fall of El Fasher in October, the last army stronghold in Darfur, the RSF consolidated control of the region, where months earlier it declared a parallel administration. Fighting has now shifted to the oil-rich Kordofan region, raising fears of a fresh wave of atrocities. Aid agencies are still struggling to access some of the most affected areas. Both the army and RSF are accused of blocking aid and using starvation as a weapon of war. Across the country, about 2/3 of the population are in need of urgent humanitarian assistance. The UN has confirmed famine in parts of Darfur and Kordofan. The cost of the conflict on families and communities has been huge. Cases of conflict-related gender-based violence have surged across displaced populations. Millions of women and girls are struggling to access sexual and reproductive health services. Healthcare services have also collapsed in many areas, leading to an increase in disease outbreaks. Thousands of children are out of schools as institutions remain closed or are being used as displacement camps. But as the fighting rages on, civilians continue to bear the brunt of the conflict. Those are your figures for Sudan. I leave it there for now. Let's see what our correspondent Naba Mohideen in Port Sudan has for us.
Hi everyone, I am Naba Mohideen. It was one of the hardest years I ever covered. And today, I want to share with you how the experience has been like. Reporting on Sudan's conflict in 2025 felt like living between two worlds, the story you tell and the story you live every day. Moving around was one of the biggest challenges. Roads closed without warning, communication cut off for hours, and every trip had to be planned twice, one plan for safety and one for backup. But through all these difficult moments, the people I met kept me going. I spoke to families who shared the little they had. I spoke to volunteers who crossed dangerous areas to just deliver aid or supplies. And the young people determined to keep their education alive, however they could. Those conversations kept reminding me why we tell these stories. There were weeks when I couldn't return home. Not knowing what it would be possible is a feeling I never fully got used to. Being away from the familiar, from neighbors, from family routines, it changes how you experience time. The conflict isn't just a news event. It becomes something that shapes your days. As a reporter, you learn to balance urgency with care. Every voice matters. And at the same time, you carry the weight of making sure the story is told responsibly, especially when access is limited and information is so hard to verify. And still, there are moments of relief, a celebration, people gathering for a cup of tea, a bakery opening, children finding their way to play, even if just for a short break. Those moments showed me how deeply people here hold on to hope. Covering this conflict has changed me. It taught me resilience, it tested my limits, and it reminded me that even in the hardest conditions, people find the strength. And as journalists, our responsibility to make sure their stories are seen and heard.
In the Democratic Republic of Congo, fighting has persisted around the city of Uvira in the country's volatile eastern region. That's despite claims by the M23 rebel group that it has withdrawn from the area in a goodwill gesture in response to a request by the U.S. to support peace efforts. Clashes have been reported in Makobola and along key routes linking Uvira to Fizi and Baraka as Congolese forces and allied local militias battle M23 fighters. Residents say ongoing gunfire has severely disrupted their daily life, and they've raised doubts about the recent rebel withdrawal claims. Analysts have warned that the renewed violence could derail peace efforts and allow the conflict to spread further across South Kivu province and beyond. Now, the renewed fighting between the M23 rebels and government forces and their allied militia have diminished hopes that the long-running conflict in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo can be brought to an end, meaning the war could drag into the coming year. CGTN's Chris Ochambringa has more from Kinshasa.
The M23 rebel group launched a new offensive against the DRC army in late 2021 and seized territories in North Kivu province in the east. But despite mediation efforts by several African countries, the fighting only escalated. This January, Qatar and the U.S. have since stepped in to help end the conflict. A ceasefire mediated by Qatar in November between the government and the M23 has yet to gain traction, while a U.S.-brokered peace deal between the DRC and Rwanda, signed on December 4th, is already showing its fragility.
Il y a des questions bien plus profondes qui restent des éléments de division, notamment.
There are several issues that still cause divisions among the warring parties, notably the intervention of Rwanda's government in our local administration, the presence of Rwandan troops in the east, and the identity question which escalated the conflict, the issue of the Banyamulenge community. If we don't resolve those issues, we won't be able to build confidence to restore peace.
The major provisions of the U.S. agreement between the two states include the neutralization of the Democratic Forces for the Liberation of Rwanda by the DRC government and the withdrawal of Rwandan forces from Congolese territory. The nations are also supposed to carry out economic cooperation in the mining, tourism and infrastructure sectors in order to establish lasting peace. The U.S. government also signed a separate deal with the DRC that will grant U.S. companies priority access to critical minerals like cobalt, copper and lithium. Most ordinary citizens caught up in the cycle of violence only hope for an end to the fighting.
Our major concern is that peace is restored. We do not want any problem with the Rwandans. 2026 should be a year of peace for us all.
Many of the millions of displaced are farmers whose livelihoods have been devastated by the continued fighting. The Qatar-mediated talks are likely to continue into 2026 as Kinshasa continues negotiating with the M23 rebels. Tensions are still high, though, given the refusal by both parties to make major concessions. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Several African countries went through political transitions in 2025. Some of these can be complex, ranging from democratic transitions to more contentious changes of government. Let's start with the countries which underwent peaceful political transitions in 2025. CGTN's Wilkista Nyabwa has been reviewing what happened as power changed hands and now reports.
After her election in 2024, this year 72-year-old Netumbo Nandi-Ndaitwah became one of the few women leaders on the African continent when she was sworn in as president of Namibia. While the opposition raised concerns about the exercise, the Electoral Commission upheld her election. In Gabon, military leader Brice Oligui Nguema won the country's presidential election with a landslide. The Interior Ministry said that Nguema, who had led a 2023 military coup, had secured about 90% of the vote. With his win, Nguema ended 55 years of the Bongo family's rule. Malawi's former president, Peter Mutharika, was also declared the winner of his country's presidential election in a huge comeback for the 85-year-old. He beat Lazarus Chakwera, who had served just one term. While in Seychelles, the main opposition leader, Patrick Hamini, defeated incumbent Wavel Ramkalawan in a runoff vote. Election disputes, however, broke out in a number of countries. Protests erupted in Tanzania after Samia Suluhu was declared the winner of the presidential race with 98% of the vote. She had faced little opposition as key rival candidates were either imprisoned or had been barred from running. In the aftermath of the election, hundreds were reportedly killed in post-polls violence. In Cameroon, the country's Constitutional Council declared 92-year-old Paul Biya the winner of the presidential vote after a contested election that led to deadly clashes. In Côte d'Ivoire, 83-year-old Alassane Ouattara won the presidential election, securing a fourth term in office amid sporadic protests over the barring of key contenders from taking part in the polls. Meanwhile, transition to civilian rule has delayed in Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger after the mandates of the military rulers there were extended indefinitely. Still, in West Africa, Guinea-Bissau's Electoral Commission said it could not complete the presidential election and release results after armed men seized polling materials and destroyed its servers. Instead, the military swore in Major General Hotan Tam as a new president, and he has promised a one-year transitional period. In Madagascar, youth-led protests led to the ouster of the country's president and a transition to military rule.
Let's broaden this discussion further with insights from political analyst Dr. Gideon Chitanga. In this conversation, we examine conflicts in the continent and what needs to change for Africa to witness proper governance. Let's listen in.
The statistics of conflict in the African continent is shocking. According to the International Committee of the Red Cross, Africa constitutes about 40% of the current conflicts. And I do not think that there is only one reason or two reasons to this. I think African leaders should be holistically looking at the regional institutions, to go back to your question, and say how can they regional constitutions enforce the rules that were adopted by African leaders. The second thing is within the countries. Each country has to really invest so much in deepening constitutional rules that are legitimate within particular states. And I think that is important. The last part is governance in terms of rules and norms should be something that both leaders and the citizens agree on and are committed to upholding. We increasingly see in the continent that there's a sort of a disjuncture between the expectations and interests of citizens and what they seek to enforce or apply in terms of governance and what the leaders resort to in terms of what they believe are the best ways to govern their countries.
Despite its challenges, Africa increasingly asserted its voice on the world stage, expanding its influence. We now take a short break, and when we return, we will highlight some of Africa's success stories that stood out this year. Stay with us.
2025 was a momentous year for Africa, a year that reshaped the continent's path. Despite challenges, the continent kept rising. This is the Africa of 2025.
Welcome back. 2025 was a big year for South Africa and the continent at large. The Rainbow Nation became the first African country to lead the G20. Johannesburg hosted the group's annual summit in November, a meeting which the U.S. boycotted over ongoing diplomatic tensions. President Cyril Ramaphosa said he wanted to use the position to advance both Africa's interests and those of the global South. How did he get on? Sumitra Naidu takes a look.
South Africa's long year as G20 president culminated in a two-day summit in Johannesburg in late November. One last chance to put Africa front and center on the global agenda. Under the themes equity, sustainability and inclusivity, South Africa pushed for the issues these governments want addressed the most: debt reform and access to affordable finance. African governments are sinking under their massive debt burdens, with most countries spending more on servicing debt rather than on infrastructure development, health or education.
South Africa has used this presidency to place the priorities of Africa and the global South firmly at the heart of the G20 agenda. Our agreement on a declaration during this summit demonstrates the value of the G20 as a forum that can facilitate joint action on issues of shared concern. More than that, it reaffirms our renewed commitment to multilateral cooperation and our recognition that our shared goals outweigh our differences.
South Africa highlighted the continent's rich resources and the need for value addition, not just extraction. Africa holds more than 30% of the world's critical minerals, but receives a mere 5% from global revenues from these supply chains. The G20 acknowledged Africa's strategic role by committing to support green industrialization and mineral beneficiation, marking a significant shift towards industrial development and not just resource supply. South Africa wrapped up the G20 on a high note that wasn't at all dulled by the absence of the Americans, who continue their offensive posturing against Africa's biggest economy.
President Trump can talk all he wants. The only thing he's probably going to do, because he said he's not going to invite South Africa next year to 2026 G20 summits in the United States. But this is just a talk. And even if it happens, South Africa is not going to die as a country. Things are still going on.
President Cyril Ramaphosa is being praised for his diplomacy and for hosting a summit that brought his African counterparts to the table. Leaders agreed to 6 key priorities for Africa, which include inclusive development, reform of international finance institutions for fairer African representation, more focus on food security and agriculture, also increased investment for vaccine and pharmaceutical manufacturing to intensify low-carbon transitions with growth and development, and improved intra-African trade through the African Continental Free Trade Area. While work has already begun in these areas, South Africa's G20 shone the light on these issues for further investment and implementation. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg.
Onto the world of artificial intelligence. It is not only trendy, but it's also seen as a transformative force reshaping industries and lives. From enhancing agricultural methods to revolutionizing healthcare, experts say AI is infiltrating every aspect of society, driving innovation and growth. In Africa, AI development and innovation is rapidly evolving. And in Nigeria, one young tech-savvy innovator is cashing in. He set up a special university dedicated solely to artificial intelligence. CGTN's Deji Bademosi tells us more.
As nations across Africa embrace technological progress, the need for skilled AI professionals is surging. Educational institutions are rising to the occasion, preparing the next generation of tech talents to meet the need. In Nigeria, Curators University, located in Modakeke, Osun State, southwest Nigeria, is leading the drive. This pioneering institution is the first in the country and on the continent dedicated solely to artificial intelligence. The brain behind it is tech expert Olushola Amusan.
When I first left FUTA as a graduate, I moved to Microsoft and I saw how education needed to be transformed to meet the standards of the industry. And it was a time where Microsoft was just driving its machine learning and artificial intelligence programs. So we went on sometimes in 2016 to begin to envision what a university that is solely focused on artificial intelligence would look like. We were, of course, earlier than our time, so our focus was on data science and machine learning.
The university is due to begin academic session in January, starting first with diploma courses before delving into degree programs. Some software engineers who are seeking to broaden their knowledge in artificial intelligence have already enrolled at the university and are waiting for when the doors of the institute will be opened for them to begin formal classes.
So I want to study the 3D printing and polymer science at Curators University because at Curators University, I'll be able to integrate the 3D with artificial intelligence to enhance the context performance for building materials and infrastructures that can enhance Africa.
Nigeria is investing big in artificial intelligence. Last year, the government launched its national AI strategy with a plan to use the technology to boost the country's economy and make Nigeria a global tech leader. And through its artificial intelligence research scheme, the country's National Information Technology Development Agency, NITDA, is providing funding grants to startups involved in AI development. Even Google has announced a $2.1 million funding program to develop AI talents around the country.
The technology ecosystem, we would have failed our people and the future generation if we sleep on artificial intelligence. Because these are a set of technologies that will control what you think, how we do literally everything. And folks will wake up in 5 years and ask not just me as the minister, but also you, Tomiwa, and every ecosystem leader, what were we doing when this thing started?
The horizon looks bright for Curators University, but the journey is certainly not going to be a smooth one. Deji Bademosi, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Still on the same, innovation is becoming a critical tool in addressing food security challenges in Africa. For more on how new technology is shaping the future of food across the continent, I'm joined in our studio here in Nairobi by our reporter Enoch Sikolia. Enoch, it's good to have you with us. Now, you have traveled across Africa. Could you share with us some examples of innovations that you have come across that are making a real difference at the grassroots and also the main technological trends that you've observed?
Well, to begin with, we are looking at an AI era, and across Africa, that is something that is being embraced by most Africans as they seek to address food security challenges. We are talking about a time when there is a lot of urbanization across Africa, and there is also the challenge of climate change. And so when we talk about innovation, AI tools, they're coming in handy to address some of these issues. I'll give you some good examples. Like, for example, in Kenya, there is AI tools like Plant Village and others like Agromist that have been tailor-made to tackle some of the challenges as far as tackling pests and crop diseases are concerned. It's a simple AI tool whereby farmers install in their farms, and it uses, actually it's solar powered. So what happens is that whenever the farm is infested by diseases or infested by pests, this system sends an alert to a farmer via mobile phone, and then highlighting the areas of concern, if it's a pest infestation, and then what happens next. It also gives the details of the pest, the kind of pest, and the management. So it enables these farmers to cut costs. Before AI and before this innovation, farmers would walk to long distance places to seek for lab investigations, and also seek for officials, which sometimes it could take long. Now, when you go, for example, to DRC, they have what you call Kivu Green. There is an innovation called Kivu Green. Now, Kivu is a place, is in DRC. Now, what they're doing is they're sharing information to farmers, given the challenges that is in this vast country that has also the challenges in terms of infrastructure, movement, and everything. So they are linking farmers to markets whereby it's easy now for people who are seeking certain crops, people who are seeking certain food, to know exactly where they can get. So it's a linkage, it forms a linkage between the farmers and the markets. Then, besides the AI, there is something that many young people, especially across Africa, have taken up, and especially in urban centers. It's called vertical farmers. When you move across Africa, when you move to cities, towns, you will see young men having sack gardens. They have all manner of things in terms of, when we're looking at, for example, containers. They're doing farming on rooftops. It's really happening. And some of the innovative systems they're using are, for example, hydroponics. There's what we call aeroponics, and there's what we call aquaponics. And in short, they are trying to address the issue of food security. And remember, there is rapid urbanization across Africa. Towns are expanding, cities are expanding. And so the issue of food security now comes in. And with such innovations, these young people are trying to see how they can also add to the food basket in their various countries.
Indeed, they're creating solutions. Enoch, thank you very much for those insights. Enoch Sikoli speaking to us here in our studios. Now, there is growing international pressure on Western institutions to repatriate cultural objects plundered from Africa during the colonial era. Did you know that just this year alone, nearly 200 cultural objects have been handed back to African governments? The governments say it is important to have back what belongs to them so that they can preserve it and pass it on to the next generations. Thousands of them, however, remain on display in museums, universities, and private collections, mainly in Europe and North America. CGTN's Caroline B now looks at some of the major repatriations this year.
In November, Germany returned 12 cultural artifacts to Ethiopia, a move both countries described as strengthening cultural ties. The items, which include shields, crowns and paintings reflecting Ethiopian royal traditions, were brought to Germany in the 1920s by a diplomat who served in Ethiopia. In the same month, Egypt received 36 ancient artifacts from the US. They included a Roman-era mummy mask and 4 manuscripts. Before that, the Netherlands and Belgium had also returned antiquities, all illegally removed from Egypt and recovered after multiple criminal investigations. In June, the Netherlands handed over more than 119 looted artifacts, including royal regalia, human statues and animal figures, to Nigeria. The artifacts, known as the Benin bronzes, showcase the wealth and artistry of the Benin Kingdom, located in modern-day Nigeria. They were looted by the British soldiers in 1897. In April, Libya recovered a rare ancient statue that was looted during the World War II and was most recently held in a US museum. The statue had been trafficked through the international art market. The country also recovered 21 more artifacts that were smuggled into France, Switzerland and the US after Muammar Gaddafi's fall in 2011. Several other African countries continue to campaign for the same repatriations. Cote d'Ivoire submitted a list of artifacts for return from France. Nigeria is also demanding the return of all Benin bronzes, the largest collection of which is on display at the British Museum in London. The same museum holds the Rosetta Stone, taken from Egypt in the 19th century and was key to understanding hieroglyphics. Cairo has also asked for the repatriation of the bust of Queen Nefertiti, a statue taken to Germany. Other countries demanding the return of looted colonial artifacts include Zimbabwe, Senegal, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Angola and Kenya. Some Western nations have resisted returning artifacts, saying they were acquired legally at the time and that they have better facilities and security to preserve them. There have also been discussions about apologies for colonial wrongs, including looted artifacts, but also extends to atrocities such as massacres, forced labor and torture. Belgium, France and Britain have stopped short of issuing formal apologies, instead expressing regret or acknowledging specific colonial-era actions, a move seen as a tactic to avoid reparations. Caroline B., CGTN.
Coming up, we take a look at how Africa positioned itself globally in the past year. And to help us break this down, we will be joined by our correspondent Adel Mahroui in Cairo. Adel, what should we expect?
Well, Africa has been quite steadfast in its support when it comes to the Palestinian crisis, specifically the war on Gaza. From South Africa, that has continuously throughout the past year and the year before led international justice measures against the Israeli government for its attack on the Palestinians, to a negotiations and mediation efforts led by Egypt. Both have been backed by many countries in the continent. Africa wants to see justice, and more importantly, what is the role of Africa that will be coming next in 2026?
Well, Adel, thank you very much for that. We'll be speaking to you in a few minutes from now. We have that and much more, but that's after the break. Stay with us.
CGTN takes you around Africa and beyond. From Cairo to Cape Town.
Adel Mahroui. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Mitra Nadi, CGTN, Johannesburg.
Julie Shar, CGTN, Cape Town.
From Lagos to Nairobi.
DJ Badimas, CGTN, Lagos. CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
We bring you stories as they break, opening to you a new developing Africa, a continent on the move.
Welcome back. Now, in 2025, China's engagement with Africa remained positive. The year saw robust growth and increasing diversification, moving beyond traditional infrastructure into digital transformation, clean energy, human development and trade expansion. CGTN's Daniel Arap Moi brings us more.
The year kicked off with a high-profile visit to 4 African nations by Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi. His trip to Namibia, Chad, Nigeria and the Republic of Congo set the tone for diplomatic engagement between China and Africa. Wang signed various agreements during his visit aimed at enhancing trade, infrastructure and technological cooperation.
It's an indication of China, putting primacy in its relationship with Africa. It's an indication of China really emphasizing the centrality of Africa in its foreign relations and interactions.
Then midway through the year in June, the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation Ministerial Meeting of Coordinators took place in Changsha in Hunan Province. This served as a critical midterm checkup on the existing cooperation agenda. The diplomatic engagement continued as several African leaders visited China later in the year.
So I think this elevation of the partnership between China and Africa is symbolic. That China treats Africa as a very serious partner and a partner that deserves, respect, deserves equal treatment, and it has shown that not just by, rhetoric of policy direction, but also in terms of actual, cooperative agreements.
The zero tariff policy for 100% of tariff lines on exports from 53 African nations has also been a significant development in 2025. According to diplomats, the move strategically strengthened ties between China and Africa on the economic, political and diplomatic fronts.
Under the strategic guidance of the Chinese and African leaders, such relations continue to deepen, with cooperation reaching new heights in the political, economic, trade, and cultural areas, and tangible benefits delivered to both Chinese and African peoples.
For many people in Africa, 2026 holds the promise of deeper relations driven by shared goals with an emphasis on sustainable development, technological partnership and equitable trade. Analysts say observing how these elements unfold will be crucial to understanding the trajectory of China-Africa relations in the year ahead. As 2025 comes to a close, it's clear that China has extended its hand, cementing the global south as the century's engine of change. The question now for the continent is how quickly and how decisively Africa will walk through the open door. Daniel Arab Moy, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
For more on this and expectations for China-Africa relations in the coming year, we spoke to Dr. Cliff Mboya, postdoctoral fellow at the Center for Africa-China Studies at the University of Johannesburg. Let's listen in.
We are seeing a trend. China is moving from large-scale infrastructure projects to what has been described as small and beautiful projects. So this involves issues to do with capacity building, technological exchange, green development and such projects. So we are seeing such a trend. During the last FOCAC meeting, there was a lot of emphasis on localization, and it has already started to happen. We are seeing in Zambia, in Zimbabwe, local copper processing, for example. So that trend is bound to continue, and you're going to see a lot of progress into the new year. So with the tariff situation going on, I think there's a lot of shift and focus on diverting those resources and excess capacity to Africa. It also creates a lot of opportunity. As much as we provide the markets, it provides a lot of opportunity for cooperation. So trade will be key. We know that there already tariffs have been removed for 53 African countries that have diplomatic ties with China. So that is going to be more physical and more lively in the 2026, because for a long time we've seen Chinese companies and African companies trying to find areas to cooperate, and with that we are seeing a convergence of interests. And also normative aspects have become key in the last few years. So I think the coming year will be very key. They've introduced the Global Civilization Initiative, Global Governance Initiative, and the Global Development Initiative combined into Global Governance Initiative. I think that is going to be very key, considering we're coming from the G20 that was hosted in Africa and the geopolitics around it. 2026 will be key in that area.
Over the years, Africa's relationship with the U.S. has evolved from cooperation to increased friction over various issues, including trade, immigration, and differing approaches to global matters. This year continued that trend, especially with the Trump administration, which introduced a new U.S.-Africa policy that is still taking shape. And as CGTN's Robert Nagila reports, many countries are uncertain of what the future holds.
Immediately after he took office in January, U.S. President Donald Trump redefined relations with Africa by directing federal agencies to reevaluate and realign U.S. foreign assistance with his America First policy, a decision that would have far-reaching effects on the continent. The new policy would include cutting aid worth billions of dollars, disrupting many programs, especially in health and humanitarian support. Among the first casualties was South Africa. Back in February, President Trump issued an executive order to freeze aid to the country over its land policies that Trump claimed was discriminating against white farmers. 2 months later, in April, President Trump introduced higher tariffs affecting 57 countries, 20 of them in Africa. The tariffs on African goods ranged from 11% levied on products from Cameroon and the Democratic Republic of Congo to 50% levied on imports from Lesotho, one of the continent's poorest countries. A month later, in May, Washington announced it was mediating a peace deal between the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda to end the fighting in the mineral-rich eastern DRC. Foreign ministers of the two countries would sign a peace deal in June. In exchange for security support, Kinshasa offered Washington exclusive mining opportunities. In June, foreign students planning to study in the U.S. were left in limbo after the Trump administration suspended student visa applications globally, with tens of thousands of African students affected. Washington said this was to allow it to implement a new social media vetting regime that would red flag applicants in violation of U.S. policy. The suspension was lifted a month later after the new rules came into effect. In July, leaders from 5 West African nations, Gabon, Guinea-Bissau, Liberia, Mauritania and Senegal, all rich in mineral and natural resources, were invited to Washington for a summit with President Trump. Not much details were made public. In the second half of the year, it emerged that the U.S. had expanded its third-party deportations program to Africa. South Sudan and Eswatini had received deportees of foreign nationals in July, while Rwanda had received deportees in August and Ghana in September.
We were approached by the U.S. to accept third-party nationals who were being removed from the U.S.
Later in September, the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, which had been the cornerstone of U.S.-Africa economic partnerships, lapsed and was not renewed. In November, President Trump refused to attend the G20 summit in South Africa, claiming there was genocide against white farmers in the host country, despite no evidence to support the claim. Trump also announced that South Africa would not be invited to next year's summit in Florida. There is no doubt this is a new era for U.S.-Africa relations, one that has shifted from foreign aid to commercial diplomacy and resource access. Experts say there are opportunities and risks for all. Still, Africa wants a clear and consistent policy framework in 2026 that benefits both sides. Bobadagela, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
To delve deeper into this, we spoke with Macharia Monene, a professor of international relations at the United States International University, Africa. Let's hear his thoughts.
Well, the relationship at present is on the downside. It's kind of freezing, if there is such a thing as freezing relation. It's not very warm. Because of things that have happened this year. We have a president in the United States, Donald Trump, who appears determined to overthrow everything, whether in the U.S. domestically or internationally, and by overthrowing everything to change the way countries are related to each other or entities. And we saw the other day, out of spite, the U.S. refusing to participate in G20 because it was held in Africa. That in itself, it's a really slap on the face. Neither side is sitting pretty to see what it can do. The Africans are not sitting pretty. The U.S. is not sitting pretty. There's chaos. So how does each handle the other? And each African country has to think seriously how to deal with an overexcited Trump. As the Africans, the leadership needs to reevaluate itself, whether it has the right people to help in policy making.
The year 2025 marked a turning point in diplomacy over the Gaza crisis, as Egypt and other key mediators recorded historic breakthroughs. Alongside Qatar, Egypt led Arab efforts that mobilized unprecedented international momentum towards the global recognition of a Palestinian state. Working with the United States and Turkey, the mediators brokered a ceasefire that brought an end to 2 years of devastating war, a conflict that triggered famine and the worst humanitarian crisis Palestinians have ever faced. As the region looks ahead, Egypt is widely expected to remain a central diplomatic actor in 2026, shaping efforts towards stability, reconstruction and lasting peace. Our correspondent Adel Mahroui now joins us live from Cairo. Adel, the Israel-Palestine conflict is a story that is likely to stay with us in 2026. From an African perspective, what more can we expect on this?
Well, Africa, it stands, its member countries, whether that is Egypt as one of the key mediators or South Africa that has sparked international court trials against the Israeli government at the ICJ, showed solidarity to the Palestinians. The continent, through its African Union and many bodies like the Arab League and other member states, whether that be Arab Muslim countries or the rest of the continent, all wants to see justice and want to see an end to the Palestinian crisis. The year comes to an end with that remaining to be the top issue. Just recently, after Israel announced its recognition to the breakaway region of Somaliland and Somalia, one of the key issues raised reportedly is that Israel intends, or part of the negotiations with the Somaliland self-autonomy government, is to relocate Palestinians there. This was one of the main red lines for the Egyptian president, and just 2 days ago, the Egyptian foreign minister announced new details about such negotiations, that Egypt stood firm against the relocation of Palestinians and forced migration against them from Gaza, saying that if Palestinians leave their land, specifically from the Gaza Strip or the West Bank, that will be a nail in the coffin of the Palestinian state. On the other hand, Egypt also announced, the foreign minister said during his televised interview, that Egypt received, and I quote him here, lucrative offers to accept the displacement of Palestinians, hinting that this could be could be in terms of financial support or lifting some of Egypt's international debt. But still, Egypt believes that it is the right of the Palestinians to have, and this is the role that Egypt wants to see move forward. As you've mentioned, Egypt helped in mediating and reaching a ceasefire. It is still in its first phase. Now the main purpose for the Egyptian government, along with the mediators in Qatar, the United States, and now Turkey is part of this bloc who are trying to make the second phase of the agreement come into effect. They aim to have that come forward, the second phase, in January, starting January, to push forward with it. President Trump is on board. He wants to see progress. But one of the main point of differences remain, and this is the role for negotiators to achieve, is what is the role of the international stabilizing forces. Right after the ceasefire agreement was reached in October, by November, the United Nations Security Council approved the formation of the international stabilization forces in Gaza. Israel wants this task force, the international force, to disarm the militia, disarm Hamas and the Palestinian Armed Resistance Group. However, Egypt insists that the role of these forces is to separate between the Israeli military, its presence in Gaza, and the Palestinian Resistance Group, to ensure that no fighting continues, and it monitors progress in the ceasefire agreement. It sees Hamas moving forward with accepting a government formed in Gaza that it is not part of, and Israeli gradually withdraw from the enclave. But it seems that this will remain to be a challenge, with tension happening over the Somaliland region, because the Palestinian crisis was dragged into that, and also because Israeli officials have been repeatedly saying that they want to build settlements in Gaza, they want to have military presence and establish a military base in Gaza. So the challenges for 2026 when it comes to the Palestinian crisis and Africa's role in it is still a lot to handle, and if any progress happened, this definitely would be marking history to end 2 years war on Gaza and put an end to the worst humanitarian crisis Palestinians have been facing there yet.
Adel, thank you very much for that. Adel Mahri, live for us in Cairo. Now, with just 2 days to 2026, the year ahead is set to be pivotal for Africa. Let's take a break, but when we return, we shall return with key trends and issues to watch in the year ahead.
The Global South should not remain a bystander in international narratives.
Africa will no longer accept marginalization or exclusion.
Now is not the time to wait and watch.
Let us embrace digitalization as the great equalizer of our time.
Welcome back. 2025 came with a full cycle of news trends for Africa. But beyond the mainstream headlines, audiences also gravitated towards lighter stories, some of which offered comic relief, while others sparked interesting online debates. Nyawira Mwangi compiled some of these stories and filed the following report.
In 2025, Africa's media trends were packed with hard news, but throughout the year, the continent still served up plenty of lighter viral moments. Do you remember the South African girl who couldn't hide her excitement when she got to see President Cyril Ramaphosa?
It's an honor to be here, and it's my first time seeing the president. Hello, Cupcake.
Such a lovely interaction. And still in South Africa, the Constitutional Court surprised many by allowing men to take their wives' surnames, scrapping an old apartheid-era rule. Now, online reactions split between cheers for equality and jeers for ignoring tradition. Nigeria had one of this year's most unusual stories. In Kano State, a court ordered 2 TikTok creators to marry after their viral indecent videos. Social media went wild, only for the wedding to be cancelled after officials revealed that the potential groom had faked being in love to escape prosecution. And down south, Botswana made history by becoming the first ever African country to win the 4x400 meter relay at the World Athletics Championships. This was such a huge achievement for the country of less than 3 million people that the government declared a national public holiday to celebrate the record. And still in sports, Cabo Verde etched its name in history books after qualifying for the FIFA World Cup for the first time ever. For a country of less than 500,000 people, the celebrations that ensued after the qualification were well justified. Dancing really did capture Africa's joy and excitement through 2025, and not even the continent's leaders were left behind. I'm Nyawira Mwangi. See you next year.
And from Nigeria to Somalia, 2025 has been a bittersweet year for many across the continent, marked by both breakthroughs and significant challenges. As the new year approaches, the voices of the people reflect a desire for positive change and growth. CGTN correspondents compiled these responses.
2025 has not really been easy, but thank God the prices of things in the market are gradually reducing. So we pray that 2026 should flow like that.
We are expecting 2026 to be more better than this year because we want the government to extend the dividend of democracy to the citizens of these countries.
We hope for a resolution to the conflict, especially a peaceful one, so that we can fast recover from a lost year and start again on a solid foundation, hoping for lasting peace and a better tomorrow.
In 2025, we saw the opening of some factories and the development of roads, which we appreciate. And we expect our authorities to ensure that in 2026, we can bring the nuclear power plant project to fruition in order to boost the development of Burkina Faso.
Terrorism is damaging our economy. Our expectation is to drive terrorism out of our borders so that the economy can recover.
We hope and we pray as a South Sudanese that this economic crisis should change
and the security issues should also change.
We are hoping for better governance to strengthen and improve the systems we already have for the good of both the country and its people.
As 2025 comes to an end, anticipation is already building for what the coming year holds for Africa. Here are some key events and issues to watch out for in 2026 across the continent. And that's it for our Africa in 2025 special show. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on the screen and follow us on our digital media platforms. I'm Penina Karibe. Thank you for watching. Now, before we close today's special Africa Live program, here's some of the defining moments and key highlights we've documented throughout 2025. Again, thank you for watching.